The wind blows across empty fields, rustling tall grass that hides secrets. Abandoned farmhouses sit alone on hills, their windows broken, their doors hanging crooked. By day, they look desolate but harmless. By night, they are alive. Locals whisper of strange lights dancing across the barns, of footsteps echoing through empty hallways, and symbols drawn in circles on the floors that glow under the moon. Some farmhouses are not just abandoned. They are cursed. Dark rituals were performed here, and the earth remembers every whispered incantation, every drop of blood spilled for purposes unknown. Travelers report sudden chills, scratching noises in walls, and shadows moving along corridors that should be empty. Some see figures standing at windows, watching silently, their eyes black voids. Tonight, we venture into 20 haunted abandoned farmhouses marked by dark rituals, where the past bleeds into the present, and every step could awaken what lies within. If you stepped inside and felt a circle of glowing symbols surrounding you, would you investigate, or would you run while the shadows wait patiently outside? Hello, my dear friend. I hope you are safe tonight, because the journey we are about to take leads through fields where the soil remembers blood and the buildings remember screams. Farmhouses were once homes. They sheltered families, animals, and crops. But some became something else. Places where darkness took form, where symbols marked the floors and walls, where rituals left echoes that will not fade. Visitors to these farmhouses report a feeling of being watched, of footsteps that do not belong to them, and whispers that seem to come from corners that should not exist. Doors open by themselves. Windows rattle when the wind is still. Rooms are colder than the air outside, as if something is breathing there, waiting. Some explorers never return. Some leave changed, haunted by visions and dreams of things they cannot explain. Some claim they saw figures in the barn shadows, performing tasks in silence that chill the soul. Before we step across the threshold, let me ask you this. If the floorboards beneath your feet began to glow with symbols you cannot understand, would you stay to watch, or leave before the ritual notices you? Take a slow, steady breath. And let us descend into the most haunted abandoned farmhouses with dark ritual marks. Bloodstone Farmhouse sits alone in a wide, barren expanse. The fields surrounding it are empty, soil cracked and lifeless, as if nothing could take root. Grass struggles to grow, and crops fail even when planted. The air is heavy and still, carrying the scent of dry earth and old wood. Travelers approaching the farmhouse immediately sense a weight, a presence that presses against the senses without warning. The exterior is weathered. Siding is worn and gray, windows are darkened with grime. And the roof sags slightly under the years. The driveway is overgrown, yet ruts remain from tires long unused. Birds avoid the immediate area, and insects are fewer than expected. The land seems inhospitable, but the farmhouse endures, isolated and unmoving. Inside, the floors are marked with strange red symbols. They stretch across wooden boards in intricate patterns, etched with care or perhaps with intent beyond understanding. Stepping into these rooms carries a subtle unease, a sense that the ground itself is alive with memory and ritual. The markings appear fresh in some places, as if renewed by unseen hands, while in others, they are faded, worn by time yet still unmistakable. Stepping into these rooms carries a subtle unease, a sense that the ground itself is alive with memory and ritual. Visitors often report footsteps pacing in rooms above. The sounds are deliberate and slow, matching no normal pattern of movement. Travelers search for a path, yet the upper rooms remain inaccessible. The footsteps continue, moving back and forth as if someone is trapped, or performing an action beyond ordinary explanation. The interior is dim, lit only by windows that admit little light. Shadows gather in corners and along ceilings, moving subtly, independent of sources of illumination. Doors creak as though under weight, though no one is present. furniture is intact but seems slightly displaced, as if the house itself is arranging the space in response to unseen occupants. The farmhouse emits a quiet pressure. Air feels heavier, cooler, even still when the wind blows outside. Visitors sense observation, a presence in rooms above and around them. It is not threatening in the traditional sense, yet impossible to ignore. The red symbols on the floors seem to pulse subtly in the peripheral vision, reinforcing the sense of ritual or purpose embedded in the structure. Steps to the upper level remain impossible. Walls and floors give no passage, yet the sound of pacing continues, unbroken. The effect is disorienting, creating the impression of a house where ordinary rules of physics do not apply. The fields beyond remain barren. Crops planted nearby wither within days. Grass struggles to maintain color. Visitors note that the boundary between house and land feels deliberate, as if the soil itself is resisting life. Even wild vegetation avoids the immediate perimeter. The combination of barren fields and active interior presence produces a tension that grows steadily with proximity. Guests report additional phenomena. Doors open or close without wind. Light shifts in windows despite cloudless skies. Objects on tables tilt slightly or move imperceptibly. The farmhouse appears to respond to attention, adjusting subtly as observers move through the rooms. The space becomes layered, inhabited yet empty, reactive yet inaccessible. Sounds are layered. The footsteps above are accompanied by low creaks, the floorboards moaning without weight. Occasionally, whispers echo along corridors, words indistinct but deliberate. Visitors note the contrast between stillness and sound, amplifying the perception that the farmhouse is alive in some unconventional sense. Time perception is altered. Minutes stretch or vanish. Travelers entering rooms find themselves disoriented, unsure if they have moved 10 feet or 100. Objects appear in one place, then subtly shifted. The red symbols maintain their patterns, constant and unchanging despite perception of elapsed time. The farmhouse continues to function as a single unit, yet its behavior defies explanation. No visible occupants remain, yet presence is unmistakable. Steps continue above, symbols remain on floors. And the land outside refuses growth. Those who attempt to photograph or record the interiors often find equipment malfunctioning. Images blurred, audio devices capturing static or whispers. Further reinforcing the sense that the farmhouse resists direct observation. Visitors leave with a memory of absence that is impossible to ignore. The fields are barren, the floors marked. The sounds of pacing persist in imagination. The red symbols, frozen yet alive, imprint themselves in thought. The pressure in the air. The sense of being watched. And the impossibility of reaching the upper rooms create a lasting impression. Bloodstone Farmhouse endures as a place where the ordinary rules of land, architecture, and time are suspended. Its floors are etched with intent, the land refuses life. And unseen footsteps continue above inaccessible spaces. The house is alive in perception, persistent, and patient, waiting for those who approach. To experience its presence, to hear the echoes, and to leave carrying the knowledge of its enduring mystery. The barren fields, the red markings, the unreachable upper rooms, and the echoing footsteps combine to make Bloodstone Farmhouse a site of quiet unease. Travelers remember the experience long after departure, feeling the house's observation, sensing its response, and noting the impossibility of fully understanding the phenomena. The farmhouse persists, unchanging, mysterious, and absolute in its isolation, a place where life and perception are defined on its terms alone. Shadow Hollow Barn stands at the edge of an overgrown field, its weathered wooden walls absorbing the last light of day. Even when the air is still, the doors creak intermittently, a slow, rhythmic groan that echoes across the empty space. Visitors often pause at the sound, glancing around, but the doors remain motionless, swinging slightly without reason, as if moved by an unseen hand. Inside, the barn is dark but not completely black. Moonlight filters through gaps in the walls, casting thin, shifting lines across the floor. The scent of hay is heavy and earthy. Shadows stretch across beams and rafters, giving familiar shapes an unfamiliar, looming quality. Every step on the worn floorboards resonates in the silence, yet the sound seems amplified in some places and muffled in others. The hayloft draws attention immediately. Figures appear perched among the stacked bales, unmoving, watching. Their presence is subtle. At first, they resemble dark patches of hay or the angle of a shadow. But closer inspection reveals forms vaguely human, upright, attentive. They do not move or react to light or sound. Yet the sensation of being observed is unmistakable. Explorers inside the barn report a growing tension with each step. The creaking of the doors seems to follow them, echoing in irregular rhythms. Occasionally, the floorboards produce noises that mimic footsteps, yet no one is present. The still air carries a sense of waiting, of a tension that stretches beyond perception. Physical sensations accompany these observations. Some visitors feel a faint pressure along the spine or shoulders, subtle but insistent. Others report skin prickling or hair standing, as if the air itself is charged. A few explorers notice scratches appearing on arms or hands, fine and shallow, with no clear source. The marks vanish or fade over time, but the memory of their sudden appearance remains vivid. Sound behaves strangely within the barn. The creaking doors respond inconsistently. A soft gust of air may produce no movement, yet moments later, a door swings gently. Voices echo faintly in corners, yet no one speaks. Even footsteps are distorted, delayed, or reflected from unexpected angles. Ordinary perception seems unreliable, amplifying tension and heightening awareness. The barn's architecture enhances this effect. Beams and rafters create overlapping shadows, producing a sense of depth where none exists. Corners appear closer or farther than they should. The hayloft seems elevated yet simultaneously enclosing, as if it defies spatial expectations. Explorers often find themselves pausing, uncertain which path will lead to or away from the loft. Light is deceptive. Moonlight and lanterns create patterns that shift subtly, producing fleeting shapes that vanish when looked at directly. Shadows appear to stretch toward the observer, or bend around unseen forms. The figures in the hayloft occasionally seem clearer in peripheral vision, yet direct focus causes them to blur into the surrounding hay and darkness. Movement inside the barn intensifies the experience. Walking slowly heightens awareness of sounds and shadows. A sudden step may trigger doors to creak in rhythm or hay to rustle without visible cause. Pausing, conversely, brings stillness, yet the presence in the loft remains constant, observing silently. The combination of movement, shadow, and sound creates a disorienting environment where ordinary cause and effect are unreliable. Despite the unsettling presence, the barn is not hostile in overt ways. The doors creak, shadows watch, and faint scratches appear. But the structure allows passage. The experience is immersive, subtle, and psychological, shaping perception rather than threatening physical safety. Attempts to document the phenomena with cameras or audio devices are often ineffective. Video may capture empty spaces, distorted shadows, or flickering light. But the figures and creaking behavior rarely reproduce accurately. Audio picks up intermittent floorboard sounds or low ambient noise. Yet the faint scratches, pressure, and sense of observation remain unrecorded. The discrepancy reinforces the subjective yet convincing nature of the experience. Explorers often report time feeling altered inside the barn. A few minutes of investigation may feel like hours. Returning to the entrance seems difficult, as the path appears longer or twisted. Familiar landmarks shift subtly. The memory of the creaking doors, the observing figures, and the unexplained scratches linger. Awareness of shadows and movement remains heightened even outside the structure. The barn's presence endures in recollection, an invisible influence that continues beyond physical experience. Shadow Hollow Barn remains at the edge of the field, its doors swinging softly in still air, figures perched silently in the loft, and shadows stretching unnaturally across hay and beams. Each visitor experiences the space differently, yet all report similar sensations: the sense of being watched, disorientation of perception, subtle physical effects, and a quiet, persistent awareness of presence. The barn continues to stand, weathered and unassuming by day, yet transformed by night into a place where ordinary structures interact with perception. Doors creak without wind. Shadows observe without movement. The hayloft maintains silent witnesses. Explorers who enter carry the memory with them, leaving the barn behind yet feeling its influence long after the field is empty once more. Ashwood Farmhouse stands alone in the middle of a forgotten field, its windows boarded and weathered by decades of wind and rain. By day, the building appears abandoned, a relic of a time long past. The paint is peeling, the roof sagging in places, and the wooden porch groans under its own weight. Yet there is something about the farmhouse that draws attention, a subtle hum of presence that seems to pulse through the surrounding air. As night falls, the house begins to change. Through the boarded windows, a light flickers faintly. It is soft, irregular, as if someone moves within the darkened rooms. The glow does not correspond with any source outside, and it does not brighten or fade in a predictable rhythm. Travelers passing nearby notice it, a gentle pulse against the black of the field. Guests report sounds that defy explanation. Footsteps echo through empty halls. Doors creak gently, though no one approaches. From within the farmhouse, low chanting drifts outward, muffled yet persistent. The voices move through the rooms, rising and falling as if guided by an unseen rhythm. No source is visible, yet the sound is unmistakable, reverberating in a way that makes the walls themselves seem to vibrate. Inside, symbols are etched and burned into wooden beams. Faint lines trace intricate patterns along ceiling supports and across the framework of the house. When the moon is high, the markings glow softly, casting a delicate light across the floor. They pulse in intensity, as if responding to the presence of observers, and their shapes are complex, intertwining in ways that hint at deliberate purpose and ancient knowledge. The farmhouse feels alive at night. Air moves along the hallways without wind. Shadows stretch along walls, flickering in tandem with the glow of the symbols. The floorboards creak beneath imaginary weight. The faint light from the boarded windows dances across walls and furniture, creating movement where none should exist. Visitors describe a sensation of being observed. It is subtle, insistent, a presence pressing against awareness without aggression. Walkers through the rooms feel eyes upon them, following their movement across spaces, drifting between corners, lingering along thresholds. The feeling intensifies in the main hall, where the largest symbols are etched into the beams above. The chanting appears patterned. Voices rise in cycles, overlapping and intertwining, as if reciting verses meant for the structure itself rather than human ears. Guests describe the sound as rhythmic yet unpredictable, filling empty rooms and traveling down hallways, occasionally seeming to respond to their own movements. The chanting appears patterned. Time is altered inside the farmhouse. Minutes stretch, then collapse, as if perception is warped. Objects appear in different positions from one glance to the next. Shadows shift independently of light sources. The glow from the symbols strengthens as attention focuses. Then fades when looked at too closely. Travelers report losing track of how long they have spent within the rooms. Attempts to document the phenomenon often fail. Cameras and audio devices sometimes record only ordinary darkness and the faintest hum of wind. The flickering light appears inconsistent, disappearing in recordings even when visible to the eye. Audio may capture partial chanting or echoes, but the clarity of the human experience is rarely preserved. Instruments for temperature or movement occasionally fluctuate without explanation, registering small shifts in the air that cannot be attributed to mechanical causes. Some guests leave shaken. They awaken in the night to the sensation of pressure on their shoulders or the brush of movement along their arms. Shadows move just beyond the reach of the flashlight. The chanting rises briefly, then vanishes. When the farmhouse is finally empty, evidence of intrusion is minimal. Doors are closed, floorboards settled, the light inside flickers no longer. Yet the impression of presence remains, lingering in memory and imagination. The field surrounding the farmhouse amplifies the atmosphere. Trees close in on all sides, their branches whispering with the wind. Night animals stir, yet their sounds seem distorted, echoing unnaturally through the darkness. The boarded windows trap both light and sound within the structure, creating a contained space where observation feels intensified. Even during daylight, traces of the night remain. Visitors note the smell of old wood, the faint warmth of the glow, and the sense that the farmhouse has retained awareness. The field itself feels quiet, almost reverent, as if it acknowledges the building's presence and history. Travelers report lingering sensations even when standing outside the porch, gazing at the boarded windows. Ashwood Farmhouse functions in ordinary ways by day. The structure remains standing. There is no visible movement within. The light is absent, the chanting silent, the symbols faint and unlit. Yet at night, the house reclaims its presence, engaging with anyone who crosses the threshold, whether by intention or accident. The glow of the symbols, the murmured chanting, and the flickering lights serve as markers of something older than the building itself. They suggest awareness, deliberate and patient. Visitors sense patterns, a rhythm to the movement and sound, yet it remains incomprehensible. The farmhouse holds its history in both structure and shadow, offering presence without form. Ashwood Farmhouse endures as a place of quiet observation. It welcomes and repels simultaneously. Travelers leave carrying impressions of light, shadow, sound, and warmth where none should be. The house, its symbols, and the field surrounding it persist as a threshold between ordinary reality and perception. An enduring experience that cannot be fully captured, only felt, remembered, and respected. Cinderfield Cottage rests at the edge of a clearing, its roof caved in and walls scarred by years of neglect. Sunlight filters through gaps in the timbers, casting jagged patterns on the floor, yet the cottage does not feel empty. Travelers approaching notice a subtle vibration in the air, a sense that the building itself is alive despite the decay. Sounds emanate from within. Footsteps echo across collapsed floorboards. A door creaks as if opening and closing, yet wind cannot account for the movement. Small objects shift slightly, scattered debris sliding imperceptibly across the surfaces. The noises are irregular, almost deliberate, as if the cottage maintains a rhythm independent of external forces. Visitors often feel a presence brushing past their shoulders. It is fleeting, gentle, yet unmistakable. People pause, glance around, but find no one. The sensation returns intermittently, sometimes behind them, sometimes along their side. Always leaving a trace of unease. Even when the breeze is absent and the clearing silent, the awareness of something moving nearby persists. Whispers arise within the space. Low, unintelligible sounds initially, but gradually forming voices that call travelers by name. The tones are alien, guttural. and harmonic in ways that defy human speech. The sound moves from one side of the cottage to another, circling the visitors, passing through corners, emerging from the collapsed roof beams. There is no source. Yet the voices carry intent, recognition, and a subtle insistence. The voices are a gentle reminder of a presence that lurks just beyond the edge of perception. The atmosphere within the cottage is dense and charged. Dust hangs in shafts of light, particles moving as though disturbed by unseen hands. Shadows fall across walls in angles that do not correspond to the sun, creating shapes that shift in the peripheral vision. Floorboards creak beneath nothing, timbers groan under imagined weight. And a faint hum resonates in the structure. The surrounding clearing seems influenced by the cottage. Leaves at the edge sway without wind. Animals avoid the area, sensing the presence. The silence of nature around the property amplifies the awareness of movement inside. Even the faintest rustle becomes pronounced. Travelers report feeling their hearts quicken, steps slowing instinctively as if the space demands caution. Cinderfield Cottage challenges perception. Those who enter notice distortions. Reflections in broken glass that do not match reality. Sounds offset from their source. And shadows that shift when attention is directed elsewhere. The combination of decay, movement, and sound creates an environment that is immersive and unsettling. Visitors who linger near the doorway often hesitate to step fully inside. The sensation of being watched is pervasive. The brushing of presence, the low hum of movement, and the whispers create a feeling of being observed from all directions. People describe the effect as a constant pressure, a gentle weight of awareness pressing against the mind. Attempts to document the phenomena yield little. Cameras capture static images of the collapsed roof, walls, and debris. Audio devices record ambient noise and the occasional creak of wood, but not the voices or movements that travelers experience firsthand. The reality exists primarily in perception, leaving each visitor with a memory that cannot be fully conveyed. The timing of events is unpredictable. Sounds shift, whispers rise, and movements occur sporadically. No pattern is discernible. Movement can disperse the feeling briefly. But the whispering and brushing persist, returning unexpectedly. The interior space, though partially destroyed, contains areas of focus. The collapsed roof allows light to illuminate specific sections of the floor, casting dramatic contrasts of shadow and brightness. In these spaces, movement feels most concentrated. Footsteps echo, whispers rise, and the brushing of presence is strongest. Visitors find themselves drawn to these areas despite apprehension, compelled to observe without explanation. Even after leaving, travelers carry the memory of the cottage with them. The sensation of brushing, the alien voices, and the persistent awareness of movement linger. Some describe dreams of the interior, hearing the whispers again, feeling the presence near their shoulders, as though the cottage exists beyond its physical location. Cinderfield Cottage endures as a structure, decayed yet alive in perception. Its collapsed roof and weathered walls conceal a rhythm and intelligence beyond ordinary understanding. Visitors experience an environment where light, shadow, sound, and awareness converge, leaving a lasting impression. The cottage remains at the clearing's edge, waiting for those who approach. Observing from within, moving unseen, whispering in voices not of this world. Every journey into the space is unique, yet every traveler senses the same underlying presence. A combination of decay, movement, and awareness that defines Cinderfield Cottage. And ensures its mysteries endure. Ironroot Homestead stands deep within a forest where trees crowd unnaturally close to the walls. Their roots twist along the foundations, pressing against stone and timber, while branches scrape windows and rooflines. Sunlight filters sparingly through the dense canopy, casting shifting shadows that obscure the lines of the building. Visitors approach along a narrow, winding path, feeling the weight of the forest pressing inward from all sides. The homestead appears intact. Doors remain closed but unlocked, hinges moving smoothly despite years of exposure. Windows are intact, reflecting the forest outside in fragmented patterns of light. Yet the closer one approaches, the more it feels that the building is watching, that the air itself carries awareness. Symbols are carved into doorframes. They are etched deep into wood and stone, worn by age but still visible. Patterns twist and repeat, forming shapes that seem intentional and precise, yet impossible to identify fully. Some resemble letters or runes, others abstract shapes that appear different from every angle. They convey purpose, a silent language waiting for understanding. They remain motionless, their outlines vague but unmistakable. Observers describe the sensation of being seen from behind the glass. When attention focuses directly on a figure, it seems to dissolve into darkness. When glanced at indirectly, it appears to shift slightly, as if moving with the eye rather than independently. The forest amplifies perception. Wind is rare, yet leaves rustle intermittently. Sounds echo along the path, footsteps louder than they should be. Birds are scarce, and the silence between their calls is heavy. Every creak of wood, every distant snap of a branch feels magnified, making the building and its surroundings feel alive. The homestead's interior carries traces of human life. Furniture is arranged neatly, doors close with measured care, and hearths are clear yet suggestive of recent use. Dust settles lightly on surfaces but does not obscure them. Visitors note the sense of preparation, as if someone had stepped away moments ago, leaving the house in anticipation of return. Shadows inside are fluid. Hallways seem longer than expected, and corners appear to bend. Light from windows casts shapes across walls and floors that do not align with objects. The sensation is subtle yet persistent, leaving a feeling of unease. The carvings seem to interact with perception. Observers report that focus on a symbol can create a slight dizziness, a sense of space shifting. Angles of vision change the apparent depth of the etching, making it seem to move, grow, or recede. The effect is brief, but it reinforces the impression that the homestead is more than a structure, that it carries memory or purpose beyond the ordinary. Time feels altered around the homestead. Minutes stretch and contract unpredictably. A short exploration of the yard can feel extended, while standing in one room may pass unnoticed. Clocks brought inside may appear to pause, resuming only after leaving the building. The forest seems to bend time as subtly as it bends space, adding to the disorientation. Visitors experience heightened awareness of presence. Even alone, one feels observed. Sounds emerge from unexpected directions, floorboards creaking without weight, doors rattling gently, faint echoes of voices carried on the wind. The shadowed figures at windows appear more insistent when the observer is attentive, remaining fixed yet perceptually mobile. The trees are not passive. Roots lift stones and twist along walls. Branches brush roof and windows. And leaves fall where no wind moves. The trees crowd the homestead, pressing life against structure. Integrating building and forest in a single, continuous presence. The effect is both protective and oppressive. Enclosing the homestead in the gaze of the natural world. The combination of carvings, shadows, and forest creates a unique environment. Exiting the homestead brings partial relief. Light returns as the forest thins along the path. Shadows retreat, symbols lose their subtle motion, and figures at windows disappear from view. Yet the memory of observation lingers. The building, the carvings, and the forest remain, holding fragments of those who entered and witnessed its peculiar rhythm. Ironroot Homestead endures as a living memory. It is a place where the forest, the carvings, and the shadowed figures maintain presence simultaneously. Trees press against walls. Symbols speak silently through wood. And watchers remain behind the glass. Each visitor contributes to the continuing history of perception, leaving the homestead unchanged yet aware, preserved in a delicate balance between the living and the shadowed traces of those who have passed through. The homestead waits patiently. Every doorway, every window, every carved symbol holds possibility. Trees lean, shadows linger, and light moves across surfaces that retain memory. Ironroot Homestead is both structure and sentinel, a space where ordinary observation meets the extraordinary. And where every visitor becomes part of the quiet, continuous awareness that defines this isolated place. Ravenwood Farmhouse sits at the edge of an overgrown field. Its roof lined with crows that perch endlessly, black silhouettes against the fading light. Their calls echo across the property, sharp and insistent, a chorus that seems to carry awareness. Even before entering the house, visitors feel the weight of the place, a presence that presses subtly, lingering in the air and along the overgrown paths leading to the entrance. The exterior is weathered, siding cracked, paint flaking, and windows clouded with years of neglect. The front door hangs slightly ajar, swinging softly with no discernible breeze. The crows watch silently from above, unmoving and constant, their dark eyes reflecting the fading sun. Approaching the house carries a sense of anticipation, a quiet tension that grows with each step across the worn porch. Inside, the farmhouse defies expectation. Hallways seem to extend farther than the building's footprint should allow. Floors are uneven or missing entirely in sections. Yet footsteps echo clearly, as though someone is pacing above the gaps. The noise resonates through the wooden beams, bouncing across walls and ceilings, creating the impression of presence without form. Doors slam violently on their own, startling visitors and rattling frames. The sound is sudden, powerful, and unmistakable, often repeated at intervals, punctuating the stillness of the house. Some doors slam toward rooms already empty, others swing outward unexpectedly, forcing travelers to step back. The force of the movement suggests intent, a deliberate interaction with the occupants, though nothing visible explains it. Crows on the roof contribute to the atmosphere. They rarely move, yet their presence feels active. Shadows of their wings fall across the walls in the dim light. And occasional flaps echo through the rafters. Their calls intermingle with the sounds of the house, creating a layered experience that blends bird and building, nature and architecture. Guests report an immediate sense of being observed, even in the absence of visible forms. The farmhouse exerts a quiet, pervasive attention. Hallways, rooms, and staircases, all spaces seem tuned to the presence of visitors. The air is cool and thick, carrying the scent of old wood, dust, and faintly metallic undertones. The farmhouse absorbs sound, amplifying creaks, whispers, and thuds. Shadows gather in corners, stretching unnaturally along walls, moving subtly with perception. Light from windows falls in angles that shift unexpectedly as the day progresses, producing illusions of depth and motion. Time perception is altered within Ravenwood Farmhouse. Moments can feel stretched or compressed. A visitor entering a room for what seems like a few seconds may find minutes have passed. Or hear footsteps continuing long after leaving the corridor. The house imposes its own rhythm, independent of ordinary measurement, creating a sense of temporal dislocation. The echoing footsteps often appear in patterns. They pace along missing floors, pause, and continue in intervals. Guests describe a distinct cadence, a deliberate rhythm, yet they cannot determine its origin. The sound is tangible and immersive, moving through space as though a person walks invisibly above. Each repetition reinforces the sense of a presence inhabiting a plane unseen. The slamming doors follow a similar pattern. Guests note that some rooms are targeted repeatedly. Attempts to block or brace doors prove ineffective. Objects within rooms are sometimes displaced after the slams, suggesting movement without physical touch. The house responds as if aware, interacting with attention and movement in ways that challenge ordinary perception. Even familiar spaces feel alien. Corridors that should lead directly to a room may shift subtly in appearance. Rooms appear larger or smaller than expected, hallways seem to elongate, and angles in corners bend perception. Shadows detach slightly from objects, moving across floors in ways unaccounted for by light. The combination of optical distortion, sound, and perception creates a layered environment that feels both inhabited and empty. Despite the unsettling phenomena, the farmhouse retains its structure. Windows remain intact, walls solid, beams supporting the upper floors. Yet within, the rules of interaction between space, presence, and perception differ from the ordinary. Visitors experience simultaneous clarity and distortion, presence and absence, sound and silence intertwined. Crows, footsteps, and slamming doors interact in a choreography that is unsettling yet consistent. Guests learn to anticipate the echoes, the timing of movements, and the reflections of wings across walls. The experience is immersive, pressing on awareness without overt threat. The farmhouse seems to exist as a sentient space, recording and responding to those who enter. Visitors depart carrying a lasting impression. The memory of footsteps pacing above missing floors. And the constant vigil of crows on the roof lingers. Awareness of the house's presence continues beyond the exit, a subtle weight in thought and imagination. Ravenwood Farmhouse endures as a structure alive in perception. Its roof is crowned with endless crows. Hallways echo with footsteps that have no source. Doors slam with intent. The house remains intact yet defies ordinary interaction. A place where observation, memory, and presence converge. Travelers remember it long after leaving. Aware that the building watches, responds, and persists in its quiet, uncanny rhythm. Moonspire Farm sits at the edge of a dense woodland, its field stretching into darkness under the glow of the moon. The farmhouse is old, with weathered wood and a steep roof that catches silver light in unexpected angles. At night, the moon illuminates strange patterns across the floors inside. Circles, lines, and markings appear etched into the surfaces, casting shadows that shift as light moves through the windows. Visitors report an immediate sense of unease upon entering the farmhouse after dark. The patterns on the floors seem to draw attention, almost pulsating in the corners of vision. The moonlight exaggerates every shadow, stretching it unnaturally along walls, doors, and furniture. Walking across the rooms produces a sensation of dizziness, as if the floor itself shifts slightly beneath each step. The sensation of being watched is common. Guests feel eyes above them, focusing from the ceiling or from corners that seem impossible to occupy. The presence is not constant, yet it is persistent, a subtle pressure that increases with attention. Some describe craning their necks to see, only to find empty space, the feeling remaining despite confirmation of the absence of observers. Figures sometimes appear in these moments. They emerge briefly near beams, rafters, or doorways. Their outlines indistinct. Dark shapes with vague human forms. Just as quickly as they appear, they vanish, leaving only the impression of movement. And a sudden rush of cold air. Moonlight interacts with the markings in unusual ways. Lines glow faintly, or shadows fall across them at odd angles, creating the impression of motion across the floor. Some visitors report that standing in the center of a circle produces dizziness or vertigo, as if the markings influence perception of balance. Movement toward the edges relieves the sensation temporarily, yet the effect returns upon re-entry. Sounds are altered in Moonspire Farm. Footsteps echo unpredictably, sometimes amplified, sometimes muffled. The floorboards creak in irregular rhythms, even when weight is evenly distributed. Whispers are reported by some, soft and indistinct, as though coming from just above or behind, too faint to interpret yet enough to evoke alertness. The farmhouse's architecture enhances these effects. Low beams, angled ceilings, and narrow hallways create shifting lines of sight, making it difficult to judge distances accurately. Doors appear closer or farther than expected. Windows reflect interior and exterior light in ways that confuse orientation. Peripheral vision catches shapes and shadows that disappear when looked at directly. Explorers note that the markings appear consistent yet unpredictable. Circles repeat in size but vary in placement. Lines intersect strangely. Some patterns seem to guide movement, while others produce no discernible effect beyond unsettling observation. The patterns remain unchanging, yet their interaction with light and shadow ensures that each visitor experiences them differently. The physical response is pronounced. Visitors report nausea, disorientation, and a sensation of heaviness when standing within certain areas. Eyes may feel strained, attention narrowed involuntarily. The feeling of being observed intensifies these effects, producing a heightened state of awareness, yet also a subtle fatigue. The feeling of being observed intensifies these effects, producing a heightened state of awareness, yet also a subtle fatigue. The patterns remain unchanging, yet their interaction with light and shadow ensures that each visitor experiences them differently. Movement through the farmhouse is disorienting. Turning a corner may lead to a familiar room appearing unexpectedly altered. Objects may seem slightly out of place, and shadows shift along floors and walls in ways inconsistent with light sources. The combination of altered perception, shifting shadows, and ephemeral figures produces a sense that the space itself is aware of the presence of visitors. Attempts to document the phenomena are frequently unsuccessful. Cameras capture dimly lit rooms and furniture. But the figures and the shifting effect of the markings rarely reproduce accurately. Audio equipment records ambient noise, creaks, or the occasional sigh of air through cracks. Yet the dizziness, the sense of observation, and the vanishing shapes remain unrecorded. Explorers often report that the farmhouse seems to anticipate movement. Walking toward one room may produce figures at the ceiling or rafters, disappearing as the observer turns. Pausing in a circle or along a line may intensify the sensation of pressure and dizziness. The environment is responsive without overtly acting, creating the impression that perception itself is being manipulated. Time feels altered inside Moonspire Farm. A few minutes of exploration may feel like hours. Observation of the markings, shadows, and figures produces temporal distortion, with moments stretching and collapsing unpredictably. The passage through rooms leaves a lasting impression. A sense that each step is measured and recorded by the environment. When visitors leave, the farmhouse appears ordinary once more in daylight. The moonlight that casts shifting shadows is absent, the markings appear inert. And the sense of observation fades. Yet the memory remains vivid. Explorers recall the dizziness, the figures, the circles on the floors, and the persistent feeling of being watched from above. Moonspire Farm endures as a place of subtle influence. Moonlight illuminates markings, shadows interact unnaturally with light. And figures appear briefly before vanishing. The farmhouse shapes perception, creating an immersive, disorienting environment, where balance, awareness, and observation are altered. Visitors leave changed, carrying the impression of a space that observes silently, exists beyond ordinary perception, transforms ordinary rooms into something extraordinary, mysterious and unforgettable. Blackfield Barn sits at the edge of a worn dirt road, surrounded by fields that stretch into shadowed woods. By day, it appears abandoned but solid, a wooden structure weathered by time. The red paint is faded, and the roof sags slightly in the center, yet the barn exudes a quiet presence, as if it has absorbed the history of the land around it. Travelers passing by notice the structure and continue, but those who enter soon find the ordinary facade conceals something far more unsettling. Lines etched deeply into the wood form intricate patterns, some geometric, some curved and flowing. Their purpose is unclear. Some appear ancient, burned or gouged into the planks. Light streaming through cracks in the walls casts shadows across the carvings, highlighting shapes that seem to shift when viewed from different angles. Visitors describe a sensation that the symbols are watching, waiting, and that movement across the floor draws attention. A sudden chill fills the air. Visitors feel icy hands pressing against their backs, fleeting but undeniable. No one stands nearby, yet the cold is solid enough to raise goosebumps. Some describe the sensation as brushing along the spine or shoulders, subtle yet persistent. The barn responds to their presence, reinforcing the feeling of observation and awareness. Whispers echo along the beams. Voices speak slowly, counting down numbers in deliberate tones. The sound seems to come from everywhere and nowhere, traveling along rafters, walls, and floorboards. It is not loud, yet insistent, a rhythm that penetrates thought and attention. Visitors cannot locate the source. They turn, search corners, examine lofts, and the voices persist, unwavering and precise. Shadows move independently of light. Faint shapes shift along walls and corners, crawling along floorboards as though observing the intruders. They vanish when directly approached, reappearing just beyond perception. The interplay of shadow and light distorts the familiar architecture, making hallways appear longer, ceilings higher, and corners deeper than they are in daylight. The barn itself seems alive. Boards creak under minimal pressure. Loose straw rustles though no one walks nearby. The air pulses with sensation, carrying weight and presence. Visitors feel the structure as much as they see it, an entity that absorbs movement, breath, and thought. Time becomes disorienting. Minutes stretch and compress unpredictably. A few steps across the floor can feel like hours. The counting whispers do not align with clocks or perception, proceeding at a pace that seems intended to unsettle and distort. Shadows shift with each glance, responding to attention and retreating when focused on directly. Some guests report objects moving subtly. Repeated visits produce similar experiences. Travelers report the same sensations, the cold hands, whispers counting down, shadowy forms, and carved symbols that seem to intensify awareness. The barn maintains continuity across time, as though each visitor is observed and added to the memory of the structure. The surrounding fields amplify the sense of isolation. Wind carries faint noises that blend with the barn's own sounds. Trees sway in patterns that do not correspond with the wind. Even distant animals remain unusually silent, as if recognizing the space as separate from ordinary reality. Visitors who linger feel a presence that is patient and deliberate. It does not move toward them aggressively, yet it tracks them across the floor, monitors their gaze, and reacts to focus. The whispers respond subtly to attention, pausing, resuming, or changing pitch in ways that suggest awareness beyond explanation. Physical sensations remain vivid. Cold presses intermittently against shoulders, arms, and the back of the neck. Some feel a faint brush along hair or hands, as if the structure is testing awareness, measuring movement without revealing form. Despite unease, the barn draws explorers. Curiosity and the need to witness the phenomena outweigh caution. Guests enter, documenting shadows, whispers, and the symbols on the floor. Cameras and audio devices capture partial effects, faint movements in peripheries, irregular hums, or indistinct echoes. Yet nothing fully captures the experience, and visitors leave with impressions more than evidence. Blackfield Barn endures as both structure and presence. It functions as a barn during daylight, solid and silent, yet at night, it becomes a space of observation, interaction, and subtle influence. Visitors carry memory of its cold, its whispers, and its shadows long after leaving. The carved symbols, icy touches, and deliberate counting form a rhythm that persists with every crossing of the threshold. Shadows crawl, whispers call, and the floor itself speaks through carvings and touch. Travelers exit changed, aware that the barn is more than wood and nails, a place alive with unseen observers, deliberate awareness, and mysteries that cannot be fully explained but are impossible to ignore. Hollowridge Cottage sits at the edge of a dense forest, its weathered stone walls and sloping roof worn by decades of rain and wind. Its weathered stone walls and sloping roof worn by decades of rain and wind. The windows are coated with grime and streaked with years of neglect, yet those who pass by at twilight sometimes glimpse silhouettes moving inside. Shapes appear briefly behind the dirt, shifting with intent, as though the cottage itself contains life even when no one is visible. Explorers who venture close report a sense of being watched. Shadows follow them along the perimeter of the farmhouse, moving fluidly between trees and fences. Then it becomes unmistakable, a persistent presence that mirrors the steps of those walking the grounds. Pause or turn suddenly, and the shadows retreat, vanishing into darkness only to reappear moments later in a different location. Inside, the cottage behaves differently at night. Doors that had remained open during the day lock automatically as darkness falls. Travelers walking the hallways find themselves trapped, unable to exit certain rooms or corridors. The locks engage without force, without warning, and the sensation of confinement intensifies the awareness of the house itself. Every creak of the floorboards, every sigh of the timber beams, resonates as though amplified by some unseen observer. The interior is filled with the scent of age and decay. Dust motes float in shafts of moonlight, stirred without apparent cause. Furniture appears slightly displaced, as if moved while no one is present. Locked doors, shifting shadows, and faint noises create an environment that is both immersive and unsettling. Explorers often report an immediate tightening in the chest, a pressure that compels heightened attention to every corner, every shadowed space. Outside, the property is equally disorienting. Travelers describe the feeling of being circled, of the shadows keeping pace without sound. Silhouettes behind the grime of windows shift in ways that challenge ordinary perception. Observers note the shapes appearing in positions that should be impossible, bending around furniture, moving through light and shadow without crossing physical barriers. The impressions linger after passing, leaving a memory of presence without substance, of life without origin. Sounds inside the cottage are equally confounding. Footsteps echo along hallways, soft at first, then louder, tracing movements of those who are not present. Doors creak as if opened and closed by unseen hands. Whispered breaths, faint and unintelligible, drift through rooms. Explorers report hearing their names spoken, voices that are clearly not human, carrying tones that provoke instinctive alertness and unease. Hollowridge Cottage seems to respond to attention. The longer one remains, the more pronounced the activity becomes. Shadows outside move more distinctly. Silhouettes inside the windows shift in rhythm with movement. Doors lock and unlock, creating a maze of passageways that cannot be anticipated. Explorers describe the building as alive, sentient, observing and interacting with those within and around it. Even those prepared for unusual experiences are unsettled. Cameras and recording devices capture the structure and furnishings. But never the shadows, silhouettes, or sounds reported by observers. The phenomena exist entirely in perception, leaving those present with the full intensity of experience. And a memory that defies documentation. The interplay between interior and exterior space creates a unique tension. Windows obscure the inside yet reveal movement. Hallways confine travelers while shadows circle outside. Each element reinforces the sense that Hollowridge Cottage is not merely a structure, but an environment actively shaping awareness. Every step, every glance, every pause is measured and mirrored by the space itself. Visitors describe a compounding effect over time. Awareness of shadows, silhouettes, and locked doors heightens sensitivity to sound and movement. Footsteps echo unnaturally. Light from lamps and windows seems distorted. The experience becomes immersive, drawing attention away from ordinary concerns and into acute perception of space, form, and presence. Even after leaving, travelers carry the memory of Hollow Ridge Cottage with them. Shadows linger at the edges of thought. The sensation of confinement persists. And the experience of unseen observation remains vivid. Dreams often echo the hallways, the windows, and the silhouettes, reinforcing the sense that the cottage exists beyond the physical boundaries of the property. Hollow Ridge Cottage endures, decayed yet alive in perception. Its windows obscure but reveal, its doors confine but direct, and its hallways carry both history and awareness. Shadows move outside, silhouettes shift inside, and the building interacts with those who enter in ways that cannot be measured. Every visit is unique, yet every observer experiences a similar intensity, a combination of isolation, presence, and awareness that defines Hollow Ridge Cottage. The farmhouse remains at the edge of the forest, waiting silently, observing attentively, and ensuring that its mysteries endure for those who dare to explore. Frostvale Farmhouse stands at the edge of a frozen field. Even in the heat of summer the air inside carries a chill that seeps into clothing and bones. Sunlight falls through broken windows, illuminating rooms where the ceiling has partially collapsed, exposing rafters darkened by age and weather. Visitors notice the difference immediately, the contrast between the warmth outside and the cold that lingers indoors. Figures are sometimes seen pacing in the ruined rooms. They move slowly, deliberate and silent, their outlines vague, indistinct, and shimmering at the edge of vision. One might glance into a room and see a shape moving behind fallen beams, only to find emptiness when approached. The pacing continues, rhythmic and persistent, as though the farmhouse itself is walking through memory. The farmhouse carries a strange sound. Faint crying drifts from one room to another. At first, it is barely audible, like wind moving through broken shutters. As visitors explore, the sound follows, ebbing and flowing along hallways and staircases. It shifts from room to room, maintaining a soft insistence that is unsettling and impossible to locate definitively. Cold spots mark the presence of history. Even near open windows in the height of summer, patches of air remain icy, concentrated in corners or along doorways. Floorboards underfoot sometimes feel colder, as if temperature itself is following footsteps. The contrast with the outside world reinforces the sensation that the farmhouse holds on to past lives, preserving them in the still air. Shadows twist and stretch in unusual ways. Light filtering through broken rafters forms irregular shapes, and the figures pacing behind debris sometimes appear in shadow before they are visible. Movement in peripheral vision suggests presence in places where no one stands. Shapes detach briefly from the floor or walls, lingering just long enough to be noticed, and then dissolve into darkness or rubble. The collapsed ceilings amplify the sense of space. Rooms feel larger and more hollow than their dimensions allow. Sounds travel oddly, footsteps echoing farther than expected. The soft crying reverberates in ways that make it impossible to determine origin. The eye is drawn to every open expanse, every broken rafter, and every shadow, creating a heightened awareness of the building itself. Furniture remains, partially preserved. Tables tilt slightly from age, chairs lean against walls, and remnants of bedding lie undisturbed. Dust coats surfaces but is thin enough to reveal the objects beneath. Everything appears frozen in a moment, as though the farmhouse paused when its inhabitants vanished or when tragedy touched it. Movement becomes both visual and tactile. A slight draft brushes along the skin, floors shift subtly under weightless steps. And the cry seems to echo not only through the air but through the body. Awareness intensifies, creating an impression that the farmhouse is alive in a way that observes and interacts with presence. Time feels distorted. Minutes can stretch longer than outside perception, and seconds can collapse into instantaneous moments. A short exploration of a single room may feel extended, while passing through corridors is sometimes disorienting. The crying grows more distinct at times. It is soft and melodic, impossible to locate directly. As a visitor moves from room to room, the sound follows. Sometimes seeming just behind, other times far ahead. It is human yet unidentifiable, a reflection of absence and memory. The persistence of sound creates a sensation that the building itself is shaping experience, guiding attention and focus. Figures in motion remain distant yet present. They do not respond to light or sound, nor do they alter course based on observation. Their pacing is rhythmic and deliberate, repeating across rooms and hallways. The effect is hypnotic, compelling attention and emphasizing the haunted atmosphere of the farmhouse. Walls, beams, and floorboards seem imbued with memory. Shadows, cold spots, and faint cries are subtle markers of history embedded in structure. Each visitor adds to the ongoing awareness, reinforcing the sensation that Frostvale Farmhouse remembers every step taken inside it. Exiting the building provides relief, but the memory persists. The cold retreats gradually, the cries fade with distance, and sunlight softens shadows. Yet awareness of the figures, the pacing, and the strange spatial distortions remains. Visitors carry the sensation of observation, the chill lingering in memory, and the subtle echo of presence long after leaving the property. Frostvale Farmhouse endures as a place between memory and perception. It is ordinary in construction, yet extraordinary in effect. The collapsed ceilings, cold spots, pacing figures, and wandering cries create a space where the physical and the spectral intersect. Time, sound, and space are subtly altered, transforming a simple exploration into an encounter with lingering presence. The farmhouse waits patiently. Its walls stand, its rafters remain exposed, and the collapsed ceilings preserve shadows. Figures continue to pace, cries continue to drift, and the chill persists. And where every step taken is recorded in quiet, enduring awareness. Grimwood Homestead stands in the center of a clearing where the forest has reclaimed its territory. Trees rise through walls, splitting timber and bending ceilings. Roots wind across the floors, curling around support beams and furniture alike. As if the house itself is entwined with the land. The structure creaks under the weight of growth, responding to unseen pressure. The sound resonates through the halls in long, low groans. Visitors approaching the homestead notice the unnatural quiet. Birds avoid the clearing. Leaves and branches move without wind, rustling with intention. Even daylight seems subdued as it passes through the thick canopy, casting the interior in muted, shifting shadows. The house appears abandoned, yet there is a tension, a presence that is palpable to anyone who steps onto the weathered porch. Inside, the floorboards carry strange etchings. Circles are carved into the wood, precise in form, some faintly glowing when the light dims. The pattern repeats across rooms, corridors, and entryways, forming a network of symbols that appear deliberate and purposeful. Their glow is subtle but unmistakable in darkness, pulsating gently as if alive. Stepping near these marks creates a sensation of observation, as though the floor itself records movement and awareness. Explorers report unsettling occurrences immediately. Objects shift slightly between visits. Doors open and close without cause. And the groaning of the timber sometimes matches the rhythm of a human presence. The house responds to proximity. movements, and attention in ways that are subtle but consistent, creating an atmosphere of quiet surveillance. Footsteps echo where none should exist. In rooms above or adjacent spaces, the sound of pacing resonates even when floors have gaps or are missing entirely. The pattern of the footsteps is deliberate, alternating between slow and quick, and sometimes accompanied by faint creaks from the walls or ceilings. Guests find themselves turning repeatedly, expecting to see someone, yet the spaces remain empty. Some explorers wake to discover their shoes removed and lined neatly by the doorway. Items left on tables or in entryways may shift or vanish, only to reappear later in locations carefully organized. The effect is subtle but unmistakable, as if the house maintains a memory of occupancy and rearranges belongings in response to presence. The trees growing through the structure intensify the atmosphere. Their trunks cast moving shadows as light passes through foliage outside. Branches scratch against windows, producing rhythms that echo through the homestead, mimicking footsteps or low whispers. Roots lift sections of floorboards, creating uneven surfaces that seem alive to touch, as though the building itself breathes slowly and deliberately. Circles etched into the floor are focal points. When standing near them, visitors report sensations of vertigo, disorientation, or heightened awareness. The glow appears to respond to attention, brightening subtly when observed directly and dimming when ignored. The patterns create a network that guides movement, suggests pathways, and imposes its own rules on those who traverse them. Time inside Grimwood Homestead behaves strangely. Clocks, when functional, do not align with the passage of light. Minutes can feel stretched or compressed. Guests report that movements through rooms may seem longer than expected, or repeated, as though the house loops paths subtly, bending perception. Shadows, footsteps, and symbols reinforce this temporal dissonance, creating a pervasive sense that the homestead exists outside ordinary measurement. Sound within the homestead is layered and deliberate. Timber groans, whispering echoes, and occasional thuds combine to create an auditory landscape that is immersive and unsettling. Even when silence is maintained, the air seems to vibrate with memory, holding traces of activity beyond ordinary comprehension. Guests instinctively adjust posture, slowing movement, and listening for anomalies that may never manifest directly. The homestead resists documentation. Cameras often capture blurred or distorted images. Audio devices record static, low-frequency murmurs, or fleeting creaks that have no clear origin. Some visitors attempt to map the rooms or trace the patterns of circles, only to find arrangements subtly shifted between observations. The house maintains a fluidity of structure, perception, and awareness, defying external attempts to catalog or control it. The exterior and interior converge in their strangeness. Shadows stretch along hallways and ceilings, responding to light and movement. Circles etch themselves into memory as surely as into the floorboards. Footsteps resonate from spaces with no access. Shoes appear lined by doors, and the sense of presence persists without visible occupants. Visitors leave Grimwood Homestead carrying a lasting impression. The fields and clearing, though overgrown, seem alive with observation. Circles, shadows, and echoes linger in thought. The removed shoes, the footsteps above missing floors, and the faintly glowing symbols create memories that endure far longer than the physical crossing of the homestead. Grimwood Homestead persists as a place where the boundaries between natural growth, built space, and perception blur. Its timber groans, roots climb, circles glow, and footsteps echo in empty rooms. The house exists in layers of observation and memory, affecting all who enter. Travelers feel the presence of the homestead long after departure, aware that it records, responds, and endures, a quiet and persistent enigma at the edge of the forest. Ashenbrook Cottage sits at the edge of a dense forest, its stone walls weathered and covered with creeping ivy. Smoke rarely rises from the chimney. Guests arriving at dusk feel an immediate stillness, as if the cottage exists in a space separate from the ordinary world. The ash within the fireplace is the first anomaly most notice. At rest, it appears ordinary, gray, and fine. Yet upon closer observation, small ridges and swirls seem to form and dissolve spontaneously. Some describe the sensation of the ash rolling like tiny waves, as if stirred by an invisible hand. From the fireplace comes another phenomenon, singing. Guests hear soft, melodic chanting in tongues that are ancient and unfamiliar. The sounds are neither loud nor threatening, yet they echo in the rooms with an eerie clarity. The tone is hypnotic, rising and falling, sometimes seeming to come from the hearth itself, other times from the corners of the room. Visitors report difficulty distinguishing the source, as if the sound is omnipresent and moving with them. Mirrors within the cottage are another source of unease. Figures occasionally appear in reflections, standing silently behind observers. They are vague in form, often indistinct at the edges, yet unmistakably human. When looked at directly, the figures vanish instantly, leaving only the mirror's ordinary surface. Their presence is fleeting but persistent, producing a sensation of scrutiny and awareness that cannot be shaken. Walking through the cottage heightens the effect. Floors creak beneath each step, yet the sound echoes irregularly, amplified in some areas and muted in others. The cottage seems aware of movement and attention. Guests report that lingering near the fireplace intensifies both the singing and the subtle rolling of ash. Pausing in front of mirrors increases the clarity of figures and reflections, while turning away causes the sensations to fade but never fully disappear. The environment is reactive without overt action, shaping perception in ways that challenge ordinary understanding. Physical sensations accompany the phenomena. Visitors may feel a pressure in the chest or back, subtle and unrelenting. Skin prickles occasionally, sometimes in rhythm with the chanting, as if the room itself resonates with sound and motion. Time behaves strangely within Ashenbrook. Minutes can stretch into what feels like hours, particularly when standing near the hearth or observing reflections. Actions feel slower, perceptions of distance and proportion shift, and ordinary movement through the rooms becomes a deliberate, measured task. The cottage alters both the senses and sense of self, creating an immersive experience. Guests often describe an uneasy awareness of being observed beyond the mirrors or the ash. Figures do not speak or gesture, yet the impression of consciousness is strong. It is not hostile, but persistent, as if the cottage itself monitors attention and presence. Visitors feel compelled to move cautiously, aware that even small actions may be noted by unseen observers. Attempts to record the phenomena produce inconsistent results. Cameras capture only dim rooms, flickering light, or slight distortions in reflections. The Asha's movement rarely appears on film. These discrepancies reinforce the subjective yet compelling nature of the experience, leaving the contagious influence undeniable to those present. Movement within Ashenbrook is further complicated by spatial perception. Rooms appear longer or narrower than expected. Corners and doorways seem to shift slightly with attention. Observers often find themselves revisiting the same areas, drawn subtly toward the fireplace or mirrors, unsure whether they are retracing steps or guided by the cottage itself. The cottage does not act aggressively. No one is harmed. The ash shifts without burning. The figures vanish without contact. And the singing produces no injury. Yet the psychological and sensory effects are intense, creating an environment that is immersive, disorienting, and unforgettable. When visitors leave Ashenbrook Cottage, the impressions remain. Reflections and figures linger in thought. And the subtle motion of ash is recalled vividly. Ordinary perception of time, space, and observation is altered, leaving an enduring awareness of the cottage's quiet but profound influence. Ashenbrook Cottage endures as a space where the ordinary becomes extraordinary. The fireplace moves with invisible currents, mirrors hold watchers that vanish in an instant. An ancient chanting resonates in empty rooms. Visitors experience a place that observes, responds, and shapes perception, leaving each guest aware that this is more than a simple farmhouse. The cottage exists as an environment alive with memory, presence, and mystery. Unforgettable long after the doors are closed behind them. Dread Pine Barn sits alone at the edge of a dense forest, its weathered walls darkened by years of wind and rain. The roof creaks under the weight of age, and the surrounding fields are overgrown, grass waving silently in the night air. By day, it appears ordinary. Sunlight glints across wooden beams. Hay bales fill the interior. The smell of straw and earth is familiar. Yet even in daylight, the barn exudes a subtle presence, as if it is aware of those who approach. At night, the barn transforms. The interior, though filled with hay, is silent. Footsteps echo unnaturally, and yet the straw beneath remains undisturbed. Visitors moving through the space feel as if they are walking on solid air. The sound of movement registers in the mind, yet no physical compression of hay occurs. The floor beneath their feet seems alive with subtle observation. A sensation of touch follows travelers. Hands tug lightly at sleeves, graze shoulders, and brush along arms. The contact is fleeting but undeniable, never painful, never aggressive, but insistent enough to startle. The presence is attentive, measured, aware. Their lines glow subtly in darkness, ebbing and flowing as if breathing. Geometric patterns intertwine with flowing curves, complex and deliberate. Observers report a sensation that the symbols respond to attention, brightening slightly when gazed upon, dimming when ignored. The effect is hypnotic, drawing the eye while unsettling the mind. The barn itself seems to shift in perception. Ceilings stretch higher, shadows lengthen, and beams appear closer than measured. The interplay of light and symbol creates a sense of depth that defies physics. Movements that should be linear curve unexpectedly. Walkers feel the space both open and compressed simultaneously. Whispers echo among the beams. Low, indistinct murmurs rise and fall, traveling through the rafters and along walls. Voices sound human yet distorted, sometimes chanting numbers or phrases too subtle to comprehend. The sound seems to follow individuals, rising when approached and receding when attention shifts. Shadows crawl across the floor and walls. They appear elongated, stretching toward visitors, yet vanish when directly focused upon. Shapes move independently of light sources, sometimes appearing behind corners, other times along rafters. The barn's shadows maintain a rhythm, synchronized with the movement of those who traverse its space. Time becomes distorted. Minutes stretch, then collapse. Steps across the interior feel longer than possible. Visitors often pause, sensing that they have traveled farther than the barn's dimensions allow. The glow of symbols and the movement of shadows create an environment where perception of distance and duration is unreliable. Attempts to document the phenomena produce inconsistent results. Cameras capture ordinary walls and hay, yet the pulsing of symbols is often absent. Audio recordings pick up faint static or indistinct murmurs, but the whispers are rarely clear. Measurements of temperature and air pressure fluctuate unpredictably, registering localized drops as if the barn itself exhales cold. Some visitors leave shaken. They awaken suddenly, feeling the tug of invisible hands or the brush of cold air along their skin. Footsteps echo where no one walks. Shadows shift in peripheral vision. Symbols continue to pulse faintly. Even after leaving, the memory of presence lingers, imprinted on awareness. Repeated visits confirm consistency. Travelers report similar experiences: footsteps that do not crush hay, hands that tug at sleeves, symbols pulsing in response to attention, and shadows that crawl without origin. The surrounding forest amplifies the effect. Trees sway silently, blocking distant sounds. The wind moves strangely, carrying subtle murmurs. Darkness settles quickly, leaving the barn isolated and its presence magnified. Even the rustling of wildlife seems subdued, as if acknowledging the threshold between ordinary reality and the space within the barn. The barn engages with all who enter. It does not harm, yet it asserts attention. Movements are measured. Contact is subtle. Observation is continuous. The symbols, shadows, and whispered sounds interact with visitors, creating a layered perception of awareness. The environment responds to focus, movement, and proximity, maintaining tension without overt threat. Dread Pine Barn functions in ordinary terms by day. Its wooden beams hold hay. Light filters through cracks. Doors open and close without resistance. Yet at night, the barn becomes a space of observation, interaction, and presence. Visitors feel the attention, sense the symbols, and register the shadows. The ordinary exterior masks a complex interior alive with subtle awareness. Visitors leave carrying memory. The sensations of cold touch, whispers, pulsing symbols, and crawling shadows persist. They recall the movement of hands along sleeves, the sensation of being measured, the eerie rhythm of the barn itself. The experience lingers long after leaving, shaping perception and memory. Dread Pine Barn endures as a threshold. It offers shelter and routine, yet it observes and responds. Hay remains untouched by footsteps. Symbols pulse with life. The barn exists simultaneously as structure and presence, ordinary and uncanny, waiting for each visitor who crosses its threshold to become part of its rhythm, aware, attentive, and unforgettable. Nightfall Farmhouse sits quietly at the edge of a winding lane, its exterior unremarkable under the fading light of evening. Whitewashed walls and wooden shutters suggest a typical rural dwelling, welcoming and still. Travelers approaching in daylight would see nothing unusual, the structure blending with fields and trees. Yet once the sun sets and darkness deepens, the house transforms into a space that feels alive with unseen energy. Inside, the air is thick. It hangs heavy and close, carrying a subtle pressure that presses against the chest and slows the rhythm of thought. Visitors notice it immediately upon entering. The atmosphere is palpable, a density that seems to concentrate around hallways, stairwells, and corners. Breathing feels deliberate, each inhale drawing awareness to every sound, every shadow, every whisper of movement. The atmosphere is palpable, a density that seems to concentrate around hallways, stairwells, and corners. Figures glide along hallways. They are silent, almost imperceptible at first, appearing only in the periphery of vision. Their form is human but indefinite, shifting, flowing, unbound by walls or furniture. They move without touching, never colliding, yet the sensation of their presence is undeniable. Observers often feel a brush of awareness as the figures pass close, a fleeting acknowledgement that something is present and observing in return. Objects in rooms move without explanation. Chairs shift slightly, books fall from shelves, small items roll across tables or floors. Nothing is ever thrown with force, the movement is deliberate yet subtle, drawing attention without causing harm. The effect is cumulative, reinforcing the impression that the house itself participates in the perception of those within. The phenomenon is not constant. At times, the hallways and rooms feel empty, still, even ordinary. Then, without warning, the figures appear, objects move, and the dense air intensifies. Travelers describe an ebb and flow, a rhythm to the activity that seems tied to observation rather than external events. The house is patient, interacting on its own schedule, independent of expectation or desire. Sounds amplify within the farmhouse. Floorboards creak, doors sigh, and the faintest disturbances echo unnaturally. Explorers note subtle distortions in perception. Shadows stretch or bend against walls, corners darken disproportionately, reflections in glass shift unexpectedly. The house alters ordinary cues, making familiar spaces feel unfamiliar and heightening sensitivity to every sensory detail. The perception of time itself seems altered, moments lengthen and compress unpredictably, contributing to a sense of unreality. Visitors experience a blend of curiosity and caution. The desire to observe the figures and track objects is strong, yet hesitation is instinctive. Every step, glance, and pause is measured, the body responding to the subtle awareness of being watched. Those who linger too long report a growing tension in the chest, a sensation that the house's attention has shifted directly to them. Attempts to document the phenomena with cameras or audio equipment are largely ineffective. Images capture rooms, hallways, and objects in ordinary positions, yet fail to show figures or record the subtle movements that travelers perceive. Sound recordings register ambient noises but not the whispers, footsteps, or shifting objects reported. The experiences exist primarily in the perception and memory of those present, vivid and undeniable yet elusive. The interplay of figures, movement, and atmosphere creates an immersive experience. Observers describe the sensation of layers overlapping. Shadows moving independently, objects responding to unseen forces, and the thick air pressing awareness inward. Hallways become corridors of perception, rooms become stages for subtle activity, and the house transforms from static architecture into a living environment. Time spent within Nightfall Farmhouse leaves lasting impressions. Visitors recall the pressure of the air, the gliding figures, and the objects moving with intent. Some describe dreams that echo the spaces inside, with hallways stretching, shadows shifting, and the same invisible presence circulating. The memory of the experience remains vivid, shaping perception long after departure. And shaping perception long after departure. With hallways stretching, shadows shifting, and the same invisible presence circulating. And the same invisible presence circulating. The memory of the experience remains vivid, shaping perception long after departure. Shaping perception long after departure. The memory of the experience remains vivid, shaping perception long after departure. With hallways stretching, shadows shifting, and the same invisible presence circulating. Despite its unassuming exterior, the farmhouse persists as an active environment. The thick air, silent figures, and moving objects continue to affect all who enter. Explorers leave carrying the impression of awareness, observation, and subtle interaction. A reminder that the ordinary structures of walls, floors, and ceilings can conceal phenomena beyond explanation. Nightfall Farmhouse endures as a space where perception and presence converge. Objects move. The building remains a threshold between ordinary reality and a persistent, unseen awareness, ensuring that all who enter remember the house long after they have left. And carry with them the knowledge that some spaces exist simultaneously in the tangible world and beyond ordinary perception. Silver Vale Homestead sits at the edge of a dense forest, where sunlight barely reaches the ground and shadows linger long after the sun dips behind the trees. The house is weathered but intact, its timbered walls darkened with age, and the surrounding yard overgrown with weeds and creeping vines. The air inside carries a weight, thick and tangible, as if the structure itself breathes slowly, observing every movement. The floors are scratched with runes. They are etched deep into the wood, forming patterns that twist and spiral across the hallways and rooms. The symbols appear deliberate, ancient, and unfamiliar, worn by age yet distinct enough to draw attention. Observers report seeing shapes move above in the open beams. A step forward prompts a shift in shadow. A glance to the left is followed by movement in the opposite corner. The figure remains indistinct, a silhouette that mimics without clear form, creating an unsettling impression of observation and reflection. Lights respond unpredictably. As visitors approach certain rooms, fixtures flicker violently, casting stark shadows that stretch across floors and walls. The effect is brief yet intense, illuminating the rooms and the loft in sudden bursts before plunging spaces back into near darkness. The interplay of light and shadow enhances the feeling of presence and suggests the homestead itself is aware of attention. Every sound is amplified. Footsteps echo unnaturally along hallways. Floorboards groan under weight that sometimes feels heavier than the observer. Doors creak without wind. Occasionally, a faint whisper drifts from an upper room, unintelligible yet human in tone, carried on currents of air that seem to move with intent. The homestead preserves a memory of movement. Objects remain arranged with subtle precision. Tables are aligned, chairs set neatly, and remnants of furniture appear slightly shifted, as though adjusted by unseen hands. Dust lies lightly, undisturbed by time, yet observers sense the weight of past activity in every corner, every crevice. The loft itself is a focal point. Beams above twist into darkness, forming pockets where shadows linger. The mimicking figure emphasizes the vertical space, drawing attention upward. The loft feels alive, not in a conventional sense, but as a conduit of perception, a place where presence persists long after human activity has ceased. Time seems altered within the homestead. Minutes stretch unexpectedly. A single room may feel like hours of exploration. Shadows shift independently from sources of light. Focused observation brings subtle distortions in distance, making spaces feel simultaneously vast and confined. The runes, shadows, and flickering lights interact, bending perception and drawing awareness to detail in unusual ways. Visitors experience an intense sense of being watched. Peripheral vision becomes dominant. Shapes shift at the edge of sight. Figures mimic, and the house seems to respond to movement. Even when standing still, observers feel a presence that mirrors and anticipates gestures. The combination of light, shadow, and sound creates a layered environment. Flickering bulbs, shifting shadows, groaning floorboards, and whispering air combine to form an atmosphere that is immersive, enveloping, and continuous. Each element reinforces the sense that Silvervale is aware and attuned to the living. Even mundane actions are heightened. Crossing a room, stepping onto runed floors, or glancing toward the loft becomes an interaction. The space reacts subtly, shadows shift, lights flicker, and the mimicking figure maintains correspondence with movement. Ordinary exploration transforms into a dialogue of presence and perception. The runes themselves contribute to disorientation. Patterns twist and spiral, drawing the eye. Concentration on the etchings can create a sensation of vertigo or spatial distortion. Light catches the symbols unpredictably, casting elongated shadows that move with perspective, amplifying the sense that the homestead shapes the observer's experience. Exiting the homestead provides relief, but not detachment. The weight of observation persists in memory. Shadows linger at the edge of vision, lights flicker in recollection, and the resonance of the runes remains palpable. Visitors carry an impression of awareness, of presence, and of subtle interaction that endures beyond the physical structure. Silvervale Homestead endures as a threshold. It is ordinary in construction yet extraordinary in effect. Timber, floors, and beams anchor it. Shadows, runes, and lights animate perception. Every visitor contributes to the ongoing sense of awareness. leaving the house unchanged yet enriched with the memory of those who move within it. The homestead waits, patient and persistent. Shadowed figures linger, lights respond, and floors resonate. Rooms retain the weight of presence. And the loft watches silently from above. Silver Vale Homestead is a space where ordinary exploration intersects with subtle interaction. Perception becomes layered. And every step is both observed and remembered, creating a continuous dialogue between the living and the unseen. Bloodroot Farm lies at the edge of a quiet valley. Its fields overgrown and untended. The yard is mottled with faint red stains in the soil. Subtle but unmistakable, like echoes of some past event etched into the earth itself. Grass and weeds bend around the discolored patches, as if avoiding them. And the air carries a stillness that feels deliberate, pressing upon anyone who approaches. The farmhouse is weathered and isolated. Wooden siding is cracked and gray. Windows are clouded with years of dust and neglect. The roof sags slightly in the center. A faint creak carries across the property when the wind blows. Even in daylight, the house exerts a presence. A quiet insistence that visitors feel long before they reach the porch. Inside, strange circles are etched into the floors of multiple rooms. The patterns are precise, arranged with care, some darker than the surrounding wood, others faint and almost imperceptible. At times, figures appear kneeling within these circles, shadowy and indistinct. They do not move normally, yet their posture is deliberate, as if performing some ritual long since abandoned. When approached, they vanish or blur into the air, leaving only the faint glow of the etched symbols. Explorers report a weight pressing on their chests while exploring upstairs. It is subtle at first, a heaviness in the lungs and shoulders, then grows steadily with proximity to certain rooms. The sensation is accompanied by silence, as though sound itself is drawn out of the space. Visitors instinctively move slower, cautious, aware that each step carries them deeper into the farmhouse's persistent presence. Footsteps echo through the upper floors, sometimes pacing slowly, other times quick and deliberate. They appear in areas with no access or visible support, moving across floors, stairwells, and hallways that have collapsed or been removed entirely. The sound is spatially precise, giving the impression of a living occupant above, though the space is empty. Windows reflect distorted images at unexpected angles. Shadows elongate along the walls, detached from light sources. Light from lamps flickers irregularly, casting patterns that suggest movement. The etched circles on the floor sometimes pulse subtly in low light, responding to attention. Creating an impression that the farmhouse is aware of the presence of those inside. Visitors often feel a subtle vibration underfoot, a hum in the floorboards that cannot be traced to mechanical sources. Doors shift slightly in their frames, opening or closing by small increments without force. Objects on tables or shelves may move slightly between observation. The combined effect creates a pervasive awareness that the house is alive in perception, subtly interacting with the occupants. The red stains outside are more than decorative. Some explorers report the soil feels cold, dense, and oddly tactile, resisting footsteps in the most affected areas. Disturbances in the earth appear to correlate with the rooms containing the etched circles, as though the land and the house are part of a unified presence, interacting across boundaries of interior and exterior. Time perception shifts for those who remain in the farmhouse for extended periods. Minutes stretch or collapse unexpectedly. Steps along the upper floors may repeat in echoes long after they were taken. Shadows shift independently of light sources. Guests find themselves retracing corridors or rooms without realizing it, sensing repetition and pattern in the architecture that defies normal understanding. Some report hearing low murmurs or whispers in empty rooms. Words indecipherable but coherent in rhythm. The sound moves through floors, across halls, and sometimes carries from one end of the farmhouse to another. It is faint, just above the threshold of perception, yet unmistakable in its presence. The murmurs seem to coincide with the weight felt on the chest, forming an invisible tether between the upstairs and the presence on the floors below. The farmhouse's architecture amplifies these phenomena. Hallways appear longer or narrower depending on perception. Angles and corners shift subtly. Floorboards bend under imaginary weight. Ceilings arch and descend unpredictably, creating optical illusions that intensify the sense of presence. Every step produces echoes, subtle movements, and visual anomalies that compound unease. Visitors who attempt to document the space find equipment behaves erratically. Cameras capture blurs, static, or shadows that appear only in playback. Audio devices register low-frequency hums or murmurs, but the source is impossible to locate. Electronic interference seems tied to the presence within the farmhouse, as though the building resists observation beyond human senses. The combination of external and internal phenomena leaves a lasting impression. The glowing circles, the kneeling figures, and the weight on the chest. And the echoes of footsteps create a coherent, immersive experience. Time, space, and perception are subtly altered, producing a tension that persists long after leaving the property. Bloodroot Farm endures as a space where ordinary rules of architecture, observation, and physics are suspended. The land, floors, and air carry memory and presence. Figures move where they cannot be, circles pulse with awareness, and weight presses on those who explore above. The farmhouse exists as a living enigma, recording, responding, and shaping perception. Visitors leave carrying the memory of the farmhouse in their bodies and minds, aware of the interactions they cannot explain. The red soil, the etched circles, the vanished figures, and the oppressive upstairs presence linger, a quiet, persistent reminder that some places resist ordinary comprehension and endure on their own terms. Bloodroot Farm persists, isolated, haunted, and alive, awaiting those who step into its thresholds and feel the weight of its enduring mystery. Creeping Fog Cottage sits on the edge of a field where mist gathers early and refuses to lift. The walls are old timber, weathered and warped, and the windows are slightly fogged even when the air is still. Visitors arriving at dusk notice the first anomaly immediately. Fog moves through closed doors, curling along the floor, seeping under thresholds, and filling rooms without wind or ventilation. The fog inside is thick and heavy, clinging to walls, furniture, and ceilings. It shifts imperceptibly, drifting in slow, deliberate currents that seem to follow footsteps and settle where attention lingers. Each movement produces a soft, wet whisper, as if the mist itself breathes. Guests describe a feeling of resistance, like walking through water, though nothing is visible. Shadows gather along the walls, lingering where light should illuminate. They are never fully formed but give the impression of motion just out of sight. A corner may appear empty, yet peripheral vision detects subtle shifts, fleeting shapes, and dark patches that move in ways inconsistent with ordinary lighting. Observers often pause, their attention drawn without understanding why, only to find nothing when directly examined. A faint drumming begins to accompany the experience. It is soft at first, irregular, almost imperceptible. Yet when a visitor attempts to leave a room or approach the door, it grows louder, resonating through floorboards and walls. The sound pulses with rhythm that matches the heartbeat. Subtle enough to cause unease yet persistent enough to demand attention. The cottage's layout contributes to disorientation. Hallways twist unexpectedly. Rooms appear slightly larger or narrower than memory suggests. Corners bend shadows. And doors that once opened easily may resist movement. Light behaves inconsistently, refracting through fog and window panes, creating illusions of depth and distance. Time seems altered, with minutes stretching and contracting unpredictably. Visitors report physical effects. Skin prickles along the arms and back. The air feels heavier against the chest. Dizziness occurs unexpectedly, often coinciding with the fog's densest accumulation or with increased intensity of drumming. The combination of sensory cues produces heightened alertness and subtle anxiety, creating an immersive tension that is difficult to ignore. Figures are occasionally glimpsed within the fog. They emerge briefly from corners, standing still, sometimes at the edge of vision or partially obscured by mist. When observed directly, they vanish instantly, leaving the room empty and the mind questioning perception. These appearances are fleeting but leave a lasting impression of presence and scrutiny. The fog seems aware of attention. Concentrating on a hallway or a room intensifies its density. Attempting to move quickly or leave a space increases the volume of the drumming and the sense of pressure. Slowing and moving cautiously appears to moderate the effects, yet the presence is never entirely gone. The cottage reacts subtly, shaping experience without overt hostility. Sound is unpredictable. Footsteps echo irregularly. Floorboards creak where no one stands. The drumming remains a constant, rhythmic counterpoint, rising in pitch or volume as the visitor approaches exit points. Light, shadow, and sound interact to create an environment that is immersive, unpredictable, and perceptually altered. Explorers often attempt to record the phenomena. Cameras capture dim interiors and patches of fog. But rarely the shifting shapes or figures described. Audio records faint ambient noises, muffled thuds, and indistinct echoes. Yet the drumming and subtle pressure remain unrecorded. Documentation rarely matches the intensity of subjective experience, reinforcing the sense of the cottage as a space apart from ordinary reality. Movement within the cottage becomes a deliberate act. Each step is measured. Observers notice the floor seems to shift slightly beneath weight. Shadows stretch across walls unexpectedly. Fog curls toward attention. Corners may appear familiar yet seem altered on approach, producing a constant awareness of space, light, and presence. Sleep within creeping fog cottage is uneasy. Dreams are vivid and often echo the sensations of fog, shadows, and drumming. Waking does not always bring relief. The fog may linger in low light, shadows persist along walls, and the faint pulse of sound remains, producing lingering tension. Even when exiting, visitors feel the environment's influence on perception, awareness, and balance. Creeping fog cottage endures as a space where ordinary expectation is suspended. Fog moves through closed doors, shadows linger and shift. And drumming responds to movement. Figures appear and vanish. The cottage shapes experience, perception, and attention subtly yet powerfully. Visitors leave altered, carrying memory of a place that observes silently, responds to presence, and transforms familiar rooms into a landscape of mystery, tension, and immersive observation. Night after night, the cottage maintains its rhythm. Travelers enter seeking shelter or exploration. And the fog, shadows, and sound follow them, guiding perception, challenging certainty, and creating an experience that remains vivid long after the doors are closed behind them. Creeping fog cottage is more than a structure. It is an environment alive with attention, responding to those who enter, and preserving its secrets within walls, air, and mist. Thornfield Barnhouse sits at the edge of a dense, overgrown field, where thorns twist around the walls and pierce through the boarded windows. By day, the structure appears abandoned, the wooden beams weathered and darkened by decades of sun and rain. Yet even in sunlight, there is a sense that the barn does not simply sit in the field. It watches, silently observing anyone who approaches. As night falls, the atmosphere shifts. The thorns seem to move subtly in the fading light, swaying without wind, brushing against each other with a sound too soft to identify. Figures appear among the branches outside, partially obscured by darkness yet unmistakable in form. They remain motionless for moments, then shift slightly, always observing, always present. Visitors report sudden drops in temperature. A chill spreads through the air, seeping into clothing and skin. The cold is localized and immediate, intensifying near doors and windows. It presses against travelers, leaving goosebumps along arms and necks. Even when moving, the sensation follows, as if the barn itself reaches outward to touch anyone who enters its space. Unseen hands tug at shoulders and arms. Visitors feel pressure, light yet deliberate, across the back or the sides of their bodies. The sensation is fleeting, always present just long enough to unsettle. Turning abruptly reveals nothing. The field is empty, the branches motionless, yet the contact lingers in memory, a reminder of a presence that is attentive and patient. The barn interior is dense with shadow. Light from outside falls unevenly through thorn-laced windows. Beams twist across walls, creating shapes that shift with movement. Every corner feels occupied, every shadow alive with potential motion. The creak of floorboards echoes unnaturally, amplifying each step. Branches press close to the walls. Thorns penetrate cracks in wood, scraping faintly against interior surfaces. The sound is subtle, almost imperceptible, yet it creates tension. Figures in the branches seem to lean closer, silhouettes remaining at the edge of vision. Observers feel watched from multiple angles, as if the barn itself has extended its awareness into the surrounding field. Whispers rise and fall in the darkness. Low, indistinct murmurs drift along the rafters and walls. Some sound like breathing. Others form patterns, like fragments of words or names, barely audible but persistent. The whispers move in harmony with steps, with attention, as if synchronized with those inside the barn. Temperature and shadow interact. The cold intensifies near windows where thorns press through boards. Shadows stretch and bend around corners. The figures outside shift slightly as if responding to presence. Light sources inside flicker, amplifying the movement of forms and enhancing the impression of observation. Time becomes disorienting within the barn. Minutes stretch unnaturally, and footsteps feel longer than the distance warrants. The pulsing of shadows and the rhythm of whispers give the impression of deliberate pacing. Objects seem to shift subtly in place, reinforcing the sense that the barn is aware of every movement. Attempts to record the phenomena yield inconsistent results. Cameras capture empty rooms and the dim glow of moonlight, yet shadows recorded rarely match those seen by the eye. Audio devices capture faint hums and static, occasionally picking up fragments of whispering, but never clearly. Temperature sensors register sudden drops, localized and transient, aligning with reports of icy contact on skin. Visitors often leave shaken. They awaken in the night, sensing touches that cannot be explained, hearing whispers in empty rooms, feeling the cold press along their arms and shoulders. The thorns outside scratch faintly against boards and walls. Footsteps echo where no one walks. Shadows appear just at the edge of vision, vanishing when looked at directly. Repeated visits reveal consistency. Travelers describe the same sensations: figures in the branches, cold hands, whispered phrases, and pulsing shadows. Each night reinforces the perception that Thornfield Barnhouse retains awareness and reacts deliberately to those who enter. The surrounding forest enhances the effect. Trees press inward, rustling in patterns that seem synchronized with the movement of shadows. Darkness deepens quickly. Wind carries distant, indistinct noises that blend seamlessly with whispers from inside. The barn and its environment create a contained space where attention is magnified and every motion feels observed. Thornfield Barnhouse exists as both structure and presence. It functions in ordinary ways by day, providing shelter and standing solid against the elements. At night, however, it becomes a space of observation, interaction, and subtle influence. Shadows crawl, whispers drift, and the thorns themselves seem to pulse with awareness. Visitors leave with impressions that endure. The cold, the whispers, the hands on shoulders, and the figures among the branches remain vivid in memory. The barn's awareness lingers, extending beyond its walls, imprinting a sense of attentive presence that is impossible to dismiss. Thornfield Barnhouse stands enduring and silent. By day, ordinary and abandoned. By night, alive with observation, the barn watches every step, every glance, every approach. Its shadows, whispers, and thorn-laced walls create an environment where perception and presence converge, leaving a lasting impression on all who enter. Leaving a lasting impression on all who enter. Moonless Farmhouse rests atop a hill, hidden from view by dense trees and overgrown hedgerows. From the road below, it is nearly invisible, a shadowed outline against the darkening sky. By day, it appears abandoned, weathered wood and cracked windows. Yet by night the house comes alive in ways that defy explanation. Explorers approaching after dusk report hearing chanting carried on the wind. The voices are low, rhythmic, and unbroken, filling the air around the farmhouse with a cadence that seems older than memory. The source is never visible. No door opens, no window glows. Yet the sound is distinct, rising and falling as if a gathering occupies the house in secret. Accompanying the chanting is a scent of burning incense. Visitors note that the aroma is strong and pervasive, yet no smoke rises from the chimneys. Candles remain unlit and hearths cold. The incense seems to exist independently of any physical source, suffusing rooms, hallways, and the grounds around the farmhouse. It carries a weight, a subtle sharpness, and a lingering sense of ritual. Ghostly figures are seen performing rituals within the house. They move slowly, deliberate in posture, their forms pale and slightly transparent. They circle rooms, bow in synchronized gestures, and handle objects with precision. They occupy space as though material, interacting with the environment in ways that are both convincing and impossible. There is no sound of footsteps or movement of furniture. Yet the figures occupy space as though material, interacting with the environment in ways that are both convincing and impossible. Observers describe the movements as intentional, ceremonial, yet entirely silent. There is no sound of footsteps or movement of furniture, yet the figures occupy space as though material, interacting with the environment in ways that are both convincing and impossible. They move slowly, deliberate in posture, their forms pale and slightly transparent. They circle rooms, bow in synchronized gestures, and handle objects with precision. They occupy space as though material, interacting with the environment in ways that are both convincing and impossible. There is no sound of footsteps or movement of furniture, yet the figures occupy space as though material, interacting with the environment in ways that are both convincing and impossible. The house exerts a magnetic pull on those nearby. Explorers report feeling compelled to move closer despite apprehension. Every step along the hill is measured, shadows stretching unnaturally in the moonless night. Trees sway with a rhythm that seems synchronized to the chanting. Leaves rustle in patterns that suggest attention, the forest around the farmhouse participating in the unfolding phenomena. Inside, the atmosphere is thick. Air clings to skin and clothing, weighted with anticipation and subtle energy. The floorboards groan underfoot, but the sound is amplified unnaturally, echoing through hallways as though the house itself listens. Windows reflect dim shapes, shadows that shift independently of the figures performing rituals, giving the impression of multiple layers of presence within the same space. Time seems distorted near moonless farmhouse. Minutes stretch and contract unpredictably. Shadows deepen or lighten without natural cause. Observers describe intervals where the chanting grows louder, then retreats, without discernible pattern. The figures continue their movements, uninterrupted by human presence, seemingly aware of the observers yet unaffected by them. Visitors often report a heightened awareness of sound and light. The faintest glow from the sky illuminates the translucent figures with startling clarity. Shadows on walls shift in ways inconsistent with light sources. The incense scent thickens, filling spaces beyond the line of sight, wrapping the observers in the sensory presence of the house. The forest around the hill is silent in contrast. Animals avoid the area entirely. Birds cease calling. Nocturnal creatures skirt the edge of the property. The absence of wildlife reinforces the feeling that the house is a space apart, defined by its own rules and rhythms. Every step taken toward or away from the farmhouse is felt by the senses. An awareness of the space itself observing movement. An awareness of the space itself observing movement. Defined by its own rules and rhythms. Attempts to document the events with cameras and audio equipment are limited in success. Photographs capture the structure but fail to show the figures or the incense. Audio records ambient sound but not chanting. Explorers leave with memories that are sharper than any recording could provide. The interplay of figures, ritual, and environment creates a layered experience. Each observer experiences it uniquely, yet consistent elements appear across accounts. Chanting, incense, ghostly figures, and the weight of presence create an unsettling atmosphere. Hallways seem longer, rooms larger, shadows multiply and shift, creating a space where perception and reality intertwine. Moonless Farmhouse endures as a place of mystery. Its physical structure is weathered, yet the presence within is timeless. The chanting, the figures, and the scent persist through the night. A pattern independent of the living. Observers are left with a profound sense of having entered a space outside ordinary time. A location where the past and present coexist with intensity. Visitors departing the hill carry the memory with them. The echo of chanting, the vision of ritual figures, and the scent of incense linger, shaping dreams and perception long after leaving the site. Moonless Farmhouse is both ordinary and extraordinary. A hidden space where architecture, nature, and presence converge to create an experience that is immersive, lasting, and beyond explanation. The experience that is immersive, lasting, and beyond explanation. Beyond explanation. Moonless Farmhouse is both ordinary and extraordinary. A hidden space where architecture, nature, and presence converge to create an experience that is immersive, lasting, and beyond explanation. The experience that is immersive, lasting, and beyond explanation. Beyond explanation. Moonless Farmhouse is both ordinary and extraordinary. A hidden space where architecture, nature, and presence converge to create an experience that is immersive, lasting, and beyond explanation. The experience that is immersive, lasting, and beyond explanation. Beyond explanation. Moonless Farmhouse is both ordinary and extraordinary. A hidden space where architecture, nature, and presence converge to create an experience. The house remains, silent yet alive, atop the hill. Shadows glide through its hallways. Figures perform ceremonies with precise intention. And the wind carries chants through the trees. Explorers continue to arrive, drawn by curiosity and caution. Encountering an environment that is defined by perception, presence, and the persistent, invisible rhythm of Moonless Farmhouse. Deepwood Homestead lies deep within a dense forest, where sunlight barely penetrates the canopy and shadows gather between the trees. The farmhouse stands isolated, its exterior worn and faded, surrounded by undergrowth that encroaches on the walls and steps. A narrow path leads to the door, overgrown and uneven, as if the forest itself resists approach. The air is heavy with the scent of moss and damp earth, carrying a quiet weight that presses on those who venture near. All windows are blackened. No light escapes from inside, and reflections reveal nothing of the interior. The glass absorbs more than it reflects, giving the farmhouse the appearance of a void. Visitors feel the building's presence long before reaching the door, an awareness that is tactile, subtle, yet undeniable. Shadows move with uncanny precision. Travelers report that as they walk along the path, the shadows cast on the ground begin to mirror their own movements exactly. Each step, tilt, and gesture is copied, sometimes by figures that appear denser than natural shadow should allow. The effect is unsettling, producing the sensation that the farmhouse is aware of their passage, responding in perfect synchronization. Whispers echo from unseen sources. Soft voices drift from the trees, the walls, or the space just beyond perception. The voices speak in tones that are calm yet commanding, sometimes urging visitors to stay, other times warning them to disappear forever. The words are incomprehensible in content but precise in intent, threading through the forest and touching the mind with subtle insistence. The forest amplifies perception. Branches brush against one another without wind, leaves fall in patterns that seem deliberate, and occasional creaks echo unnaturally. Every movement is magnified in the quiet, creating the sense that the house and surrounding forest are alive, observing every step. Footfalls seem heavier than expected, and distant sounds arrive earlier or later than they should, altering perception of space and time. The homestead exudes memory. Walls, floors, and windows retain a presence that is palpable. The blackened glass is more than a barrier, it is a canvas for reflection and distortion. Dust and decay are present, yet they carry a sense of recent disturbance, as if someone or something has moved through the rooms without leaving physical traces. Light behaves unpredictably. Even in daylight, corners of the house appear darker than shadows alone should allow. Sunlight filtering through the trees shifts constantly, creating patterns that seem to follow movement. Observers report seeing shapes flicker at the edges of vision, vanishing when looked at directly, reinforcing the sense that the farmhouse itself participates in perception. The air is charged with tension. Visitors feel a subtle pressure in their chest and a heightened awareness of each movement. Steps toward the door are measured, yet instinct compels caution. Every glance toward the windows, every step across the path, seems recorded, mirrored, and responded to in silence. Sound is layered and disorienting. The faint rustle of leaves may coincide with an imagined creak of floorboards. Distant snaps of twigs seem synchronized with movement. Whispers rise and fall, sometimes faint and distant, other times clear and near, always maintaining the impression that presence is attentive and deliberate. Time seems altered around Deepwood Homestead. Minutes stretch and compress unpredictably. Moments inside the perception of the forest feel elongated, while traversing the path may seem instantaneous. Even without entering, observers feel the weight of unseen rooms. The blackened windows conceal interiors that seem occupied by presence. And the house exerts influence over perception, mirroring movement and heightening awareness. Each visitor contributes to the continuing memory of the homestead, adding to the rhythm of observation that defines the site. The synchronized shadows, the faint commands in the air, and the subtle distortions of time and space form a layered experience. The building, the forest, and the void within the blackened windows operate in concert, producing a sensation of being simultaneously watched, followed, and assessed. Exiting the homestead provides relief, yet not escape. The mirrored shadows recede, whispers fade, and the forest returns to normal sound patterns. Sunlight softens the heavy presence. Yet the memory of movement, observation, and the subtle insistence of the farmhouse lingers long after leaving the path behind. Travelers carry the awareness that the homestead continues to watch, remember, and respond. Deepwood Homestead endures as a threshold. It is both ordinary in construction and extraordinary in effect. Timber and stone anchor it, yet shadows, whispers, and blackened windows animate perception. The house records movement, mirrors presence, and preserves memory across time. Every visitor experiences the intersection of observation, environment, and perception, leaving with a lasting impression of the farmhouse's quiet dominion. The homestead waits silently. The homestead waits silently. Shadows linger, whispers echo faintly, and the blackened windows remain unbroken, holding the void within. Deepwood Homestead exists as a place where presence, perception, and memory converge, a space that observes, mirrors, and shapes every step of those who venture close, remaining patient and persistent in its isolated domain. Thank you for walking through these haunted farmhouses with me tonight. These abandoned homes are more than structures. They are vessels of darkness, carrying echoes of rituals and the memories of those who disappeared. Some explorers leave trembling. Some vanish without a trace. And some carry the shadows home with them. If you ever find yourself near an abandoned farmhouse at night, take a moment to watch the windows, the floors, and the circles etched into the earth. The air may be silent, but the darkness is alive. Would you dare step inside, or would you turn away and never look back? Rest well, my friend. Until our next journey into the haunted and unknown.